Hello, and welcome to Joshua Wessex with me, Josh. This is a YouTube channel where we try and use facts, logic, and common sense to go through sort of what's happening in the world today and try and make sense of it. If that's the sort of thing you like, please do like and subscribe to my videos. I've got a bunch more in the pipeline now, so feel free to go back and look at those. Otherwise, we'll just get into it. So today's topic, we're going to be looking at white privilege. Now, you may have heard this term. You may not have. It's been around for about, I'd say, easily 10 years now. Essentially, what white privilege is that the fact of you being white means that you've sort of got an unfair advantage or just an advantage amongst other people. So that's what I'm going to be looking at today. Now, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and be as nice as possible. I'm going to try and give the most generous interpretation of white privilege, and then we're going to dismantle it all at the end. So, if anything I say you completely disagree with, do let me know in the comments. Again, I am trying to be as nice as possible in this one, so bear with me. So, essentially, white privilege comes down to sort of two things. Firstly, it is in Western countries. White privilege is sort of a term thought up by the libtards, so they only exist in Western countries. If I went to China and said, "Hi, I'm white, give me stuff," it's not going to go well for me. Same thing as well, if I went to, let's say, I know, an Arab country and said, "Hey, I'm white, do stuff for me," no, I'm not going to get any white privilege there. So this is specifically in Western countries where white people are the predominant population. So now, what I'm going to give a very brief overview of world history. Now, I might be completely off here, but it might be important. I'm going to go back to the medieval times. So, just imagine the world 1,000 years ago. You had some like rich places like the Mediterranean, so like Greece, Rome, Italy back then, North Africa, sort of, like the Sassanid Empire, sort of, in the Middle East. That there was a lot of wealth there because there was a lot of trade, a lot of slavery before the transatlantic stuff. If you look at England 1,000 years ago, before William the Conqueror came over, you had a few kings or some golden stuff, but it wasn't a rich country. So the wealth was pretty much over there in the Mediterranean, I'd say. Maybe parts of India, China had a lovely little empire. Let's say the wealth was all over there. So over the years, countries started developing, producing new ways of, warfare or, medicine, industrial technology, things like that. Then something, I say amazing happened. Colonialism. That's right. That was an amazing thing. So look at that, British Empire. Oh, fantastic. So the reason I mention that is because in my mind, I think that's when the shift really started to happen. Because obviously countries have been developing over the years, but it wasn't really until Europe started kind of branching out when I think wealth really started transferring across to the white people. So what I've done is I've gone to the Vox's website. Now, people don't know, Vox is a very liberal, left-leaning website. So I'm using very good sources here. And here's just an interactive map, just basically showing you how different countries were sort of expanding over the millennia. Now, I'll just keep that in the background whilst we go through this. But sort of just very basic thing to say is when these countries sort of when these countries went to these places and started colonizing them, they went to places that were probably quite poor, undeveloped, and essentially, well, in some cases took over, some cases made partnerships, all that jazz. But essentially, that's when sort of, things started really kicking up. So like the British Empire had the East Indian Trading Company. France started getting access to all sorts of mines in Africa. Portugal, well, they're a tiny country, inside Spain, basically. But yeah, they did very well. So that's when sort of a lot of wealth started happening. And also what sort of happened in this is sort of, well, America got formed, didn't it? United States of America, South America, all this. So when the people started to sort of colonize these areas, like Australia, like the USA, when the white people went over, they usually had, some wealth, or, they had like maybe some accounts, they had something to speak of. The slaves and stuff who went over, obviously they didn't have anything. So when sort of everything, comes to a head. And now their descendants are now living amongst each other. Let's look at America, for example. You've got this thing called generational wealth. So if you look at America, the white people there, now the rich white people, obviously, they've obviously got land, they've bought properties, estates, and then that's been passed down, and their descendants are now benefiting from, the early investment that they had in the United States of America. The black people, well, once they were freed, again, they had like kind of years of, laws against them. So yeah, they're only kind of now getting to sort of enjoy that sort of investment in the country. Now, so when they say about sort of white privilege, they kind of say is okay, because white people had all the power, they had all the wealth, which I kind of don't disagree with based on what I just said. That now means that sort of they now have to kind of give back to everyone else, and everyone else kind of needs to step up. The problem with that is, whilst we did have, these empires sort of spreading out, growing, getting lots of wealth, one thing to remember, in countries like England, France, Portugal, Spain, Russia, there were still quite a lot of poor people as well. There's plenty of people who, let's say, didn't benefit from the slave trade, who saw absolutely no benefit at all from, gold mines or, any other sort of mineral deposits that sort of been extracted in that time. So whilst I would agree that, yes, all the wealthiest people at some point, and maybe even, well, not even so today, things have changed, at some point, all the wealthiest people would have been white, especially like in USA and stuff, because of what I just said. It doesn't mean that they were wealthy because they were white. It meant they were wealthy and they happened to be white, which is the very big distinction that a lot of libtards don't get. Because, as I just said, there were plenty of poor people in these countries who were also white, but they didn't have any privilege for doing so. For example, my grandparents, both of them, as I believe, were both miners. Now, that meant I don't exactly have sort of generational wealth kind of to be inherited down to me. So I'm not sort of looking at any sort of white privilege with that sort of thing. So that's just the first thing about sort of what white privilege is. The second thing about it is introducing a concept called systemic racism. So what systemic racism is essentially saying that the country's laws and the country's policies are sort of made in such a way that if you're not the same skin color as the native group or the controlling group, things are going to be tough for you. And I can agree to a point that was happening in the USA. They had this thing called Jim Crow, they had segregation. I don't really know too much about all that, but, you ask any black person, oh, how was it back in the USA? Oh, it was terrible for black people. That's all you need to know. Well, that's kind of gone, that's been and gone. There are now laws in place, especially in England, where you can't discriminate people based on their skin colour, sex, religion, age, things like that. So when they're saying that, there's systemic racism, it's really hard to kind of say, okay, where is it? Now, with that being said, I believe there is systemic racism, and I do think it's for the best. For example, if I went to, like, yes, say, a Middle Eastern country, and I just said, hi, I'm a white guy, I'd like to get access to housing and things like that, they might turn around and say, no, we prioritise our own citizens before foreigners. I could say that's systemic racism because the system is based against me, albeit maybe my race is included because I'm not a citizen of that country, I'm not a native, but I'd have a hard time disagreeing with them. To be honest, I wish England did that more, but there we go. Now, another thing about systemic racism is they're also implying that the people in power are sort of all white, and they're obviously going to be biased against other people. Now, also, I've got special guest Paddy over here. He's just enjoying a nice bone. Nice black dog, so you see. So, yeah, no racism in this house. There we are. So, our local idiot, Humza Yousaf, he was the First Minister of Scotland after Nicola Sturgeon was hilariously beaten down by that ITV interview, which was in my last video, so please go check that. So we're going to watch him when he was a minister talking about the demographic breakup of the Scottish legislator.
Most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white. Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white.
Right, okay, you get the idea of that. Sorry, you had to watch the whole thing because it's just so ludicrous. So as you can see there, our good friend Humza Useless, just basically saying how everybody is white in a predominantly white country, Scotland, and all these roles that he mentioned, I'm sure most of them, it takes years of experience and training and work to kind of get to that high position. So if immigration has sort of only been happening in the last, let's say 30 years, mass migration in the last 10, it's probably going to take a while for those people to filter through and actually get to the top. But of course, systemic racism doesn't actually use logic. It's just saying, nope, you've suddenly got 14% of your country are all ethnic minorities. So 14% of all your legislator, higher positions should be the same. It's like, well, no, that's not how it works. So that's white privilege in a nutshell. Now, seeing it in practice, these are the sort of Key Stage 4 school results in England. Now, just to kind of put it into perspective, if there's so much white privilege sprinkling around, you would expect sort of all white people to sort of be doing amazing and all the ethnic minorities kind of lurching in the background. As you can see there, that's not the case. It's actually a well-known fact that white people, especially boys, are performing the least well in schools. You could say it's a cultural thing. Maybe the white parents aren't actually doing much to encourage their kids to do homework at home. I mean, we've all seen the school kids these days. They're all a bunch of little shit. But could be. Now, mind you, other families, like certain African countries, Asian countries, they put a lot of value in schooling. So maybe that's got something to do with it. Or it could be that when the trusts are sort of looking at which schools to allocate funds to, maybe it's the fact, though, actually, we've got one school that's predominantly white, another school that's predominantly ethnic minority. If we give the funding to the white kids that need it, we might be called bigots and racists. And as we've learned from a lot of things, something else I'll go into, these sort of people are spineless cowards, and if even the whiff of being called racist will make them do anything. So yeah, I'm under the understanding, I haven't got any research for it, so this is completely conjecture, that these schools that are performing so poorly, I believe it's a lack of funding, and I believe it's because that funding has been allocated to other schools of ethnic minorities instead. But again, I've got nothing to back that up, so please don't quote me. Now, as I just mentioned, having this white privilege now means that sort of there's like a hierarchy of sort of racism. So if you're at the top being white, anything you do to any other ethnic minority, you're racist. Even if you said, oh, that person stabbed me, oh, by the way, he was black. Well, you can't mention his skin colour. Racist. You get arrested. Which actually, that has actually happened a couple of times. So I'm not going to get him up and got him. But otherwise, and then everyone else, if you're attacking whitey, you can't be racist because they're higher up in the hierarchy. So you can punch up, no problem, but you can't punch down, right? We've seen this prevalent in this, where, for those who don't know, you must have been living under a rock, and I feel sorry for you. We've got this massive grooming gang crisis in the UK. Predominantly Pakistani Muslim men group up, groom these young girls, give them alcohol, drugs, gifts, and then they basically take turns on them and groups at a time. And it's absolutely horrible. There's still inquiries going on about it. It's god awful. Police didn't investigate because they didn't want to get called racist. So it's like, okay, this might be happening, but if we investigate them, we're going to get called racist. So, nope, sorry. I don't see any white privilege for these girls anywhere. There we are. Again, poor white people. No white privilege whatsoever. Okay? So, that's, again, another nail in that coffin. And then just the last thing I'm going to say is this gentleman, you might have seen him, you might not have. He's a Harvard professor, and he did a study to see if there was a sort of any statistical difference between how white Americans and black Americans interacted with the police. So that's sort of how aggressive the police were, if they used more lethal force, because you've always had the narrative, oh, black people were sort of harassed more by the police, like it's what was it, the Rodney King riots in LA was it's all part of this. So we're going to listen to sort of what he said, what his findings were, and just take a pinch of salt. He is a Harvard professor, so the things he mentions about his colleagues and things, these are the sort of people in education in America.
I collected a lot of data. We collected millions of observations on everyday use of force that wasn't lethal. We collected thousands of observations on lethal force. And it was in this moment in 2016 that I realized people lose their minds when they don't like the result. So what my paper showed, you'll see tomorrow, like some of you, was that, yes, we saw some bias in the low-level uses of force, every day pushing up against cars and things like that. People seem to like that result. But we didn't find any racial bias in police shootings. Now, that was really surprising to me because I expected to see it. The little-known fact is I had 8 full-time RAs that it took to do this over nearly a year. When I found this surprising result, I hired 8 fresh ones and redid it to make sure. They came up with the same exact answer, and I thought it was robust. And then I went to go give it, and my God, all hell broke loose. It was a 104-page, dense academic economics paper with a 150-page appendix, okay? It was posted for 4 minutes when I got my first email. This is full of shit. Doesn't make any sense. And I wrote back, how'd you read it that fast? That's amazing. You are a genius. And I had colleagues take me to the side and say, don't publish this. You'll ruin your career.
Oh, so we'll just cut that there. The rest of it, he basically goes on saying about how he had to have armed guards because people were so annoyed by him and everything he was doing. But essentially, just to kind of summarize what we'd been talking about with this today then, white privilege, the concept of white people have unfair advantages over people of ethnic minorities, mainly from generational wealth over the years of everything being handed down to them, which, as I assume, stems from colonialism. And then because of that, then there's a systematic bias, systemic, either one, bias against people who aren't white in Western countries. And I hope from what I've just said, I've expelled to you, yes, all the rich, wealthy people would be white in Western countries because they are white countries. However, just because you're white doesn't mean you suddenly have an unfair advantage on people. There's plenty of poor white people. And because of that, then we've now got the people in power sort of discriminating against white people for this imaginary slight against everyone else. And because of that, we've had people not being able to apply for certain jobs because they're white. We've had people not having crimes investigated because they're white. And the media, well, as you just saw from that professor gentleman there, even the sort of the most sort of well-known sort of things of, oh, black people in America are harassed because of their skin color. Well, then you actually go into the actual statistics and find that they're not. They won't believe it. They've got this idea in their mind that this is the way things are, and we have to sort of base our whole reality on that. When the truth is, It's absolute horseshit. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and next time you hear somebody mention the word white privilege to you, call them a libtard and say, there's this great video I want you to see, go check it out. But otherwise, thank you very much. My next video is actually going to be on DEI. That'll be coming out later on the week. I was going to do it inside this one, but it got all over the place. So I just thought I'd just redo this one. And yeah, and then you got to see Paddy. So if you like seeing Paddy, Paddy, hey Bubby. If you like seeing him, give us a like. Do subscribe, and guys, have a great day, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.